Hi and welcome to Aussie Sim. Today's video is a flight planning tutorial in the Pmdg Ngx for a commercial flight from Melbourne to Sydney. So we're going to be using a program today that I use for my flight planning. It's called Professional Flight Planner X, or Pfpx. That's the first program that I'm going to use to organize our flight. Once we get everything done in that program, then we can load up the simulator. We get into the computer or the FMC on the Pmdg Ngx and input all the details that we need to be able to accomplish that flight. Okay, so first things first, I'll load up the flight planning program. Okay, it does look a little bit intimidating with a lot of features. I don't go into using too many features of this. It's basic. I'm just going with the basics of my flight planning. Now, there is some tweaking that you have to do to make this match with the weights of the aircraft. With Pmdg's Ngx aircraft, there are tutorials online how to do it. I've looked at those and made those tweaks previously, so there's nothing else that I need to do prior to getting this all set up. So we'll jump straight into the flight planning. So we'll be clicking on the add flight, and this screen will pop up. Now this is where we input our flight, our flight number, where we're flying from and where we're flying to. So my flight number today is Qantas 452 or QF 452. The number there I got from the virtual airline I fly for, which is Qantas Virtual, and I'll be taking that flight later today. Okay, so we're flying from Yankee Mike Mike Lima, which is Melbourne, to Yankee Sierra Sierra Yankee, which is Sydney. Our commercial flight number will be QFA 452, like so. Our departure time will be 1700. That's the departure time on the for that particular flight. The registration of this aircraft is Victor Hotel Victor Zulu Alpha. So I'll be selecting that one, and we're going to save that, and there's our flight there. So so here's our details that we just entered. There are now a couple more details that I need to enter. So the takeoff runway, we'll be using runway 34 for the departure because the wind in Melbourne is from the direction of 340. We'll be landing on runway 34 left in Sydney, so basically that'll be coming in over the ocean and over Kurnell and into the airport that way. The wind in Sydney at the moment is 320 at 4 knots. So taxi out will be about 10 minutes. Taxi in is not going to be long at all, be about 5-minute taxi. So we can leave that as it is. We have our aircraft that has been set up previously. We just selected the registration. It puts everything else that we need in there. So we have our payload, 145 people. Now just take that out for a second. Okay, put that back in. Okay, so what happens, because these are already filled out, normally it says random payload up here, but because I was messing around with this earlier, it hasn't done that. So it normally has random payload. We click on that, it'll put in a random payload into here. Okay, our fuel, we don't need to worry about this. It's set up as I need it to be. Maybe select the APU on. And our route, what I'll do is I'll clear this, and the next tab that comes up is the quick find route. So I'll click on that and it'll find that route for me. So it puts it in here. it does come up with the SID and the star. So the SID is the dorsal 8 and the star is the rivet 2. So basically that's telling me we're going to be taking that star out of Melbourne up to the dorsal intersection, which is here. Then we'll be flying along the route Yankee 59, which if I zoom in here, it'll show it on here, Yankee 59. It'll show some other intersections along here, and that just prevents, that just basically says that we'll be flying along this route. It doesn't input all these different intersections in there up to Rivet, and Rivet can be found up here. Then after Rivet, we'll be flying the Rivet 2 star into Sydney for the 3-4 left approach. Okay, so now that we have that, the next tab that comes up here is the find alternates. Now it's already done this for me, so we have our 4 alternates. We're not going to be worrying about flying to any of those today, as we're not going to be having any emergencies, but they are there if we do need to divert. Okay, so we compute that flight, and the reason that that was already filled out is that there was a previous one from when I was mucking around with it earlier. So we're going to release this flight. You can print the flight plan. I'm not going to. I'm just going to click on this details tab, and it has everything that I need in it here. So the first thing that I do need to worry about is our fuel, because we're going to be inputting the amount of fuel into the FMC once we get into the simulator. So our release fuel, and everything is in pounds. I choose to have everything in pounds. It matches the some of the other aircraft that I have, so I just simplify it by putting everything in pounds. So the release fuel is 10,511 pounds. Okay, the next thing that we need to worry about is our zero fuel weight, and the reason we worry about our zero fuel weight is because we'll be entering that into the FMC just basically for the passenger and cargo weights. So our zero fuel weight is our aircraft weight, our passenger weight, our cargo weight, and our crew weight. That is 122,551 pounds. So that's another number that we need to remember. Now, just for the sake of it, and to help yourselves out if you ever are planning using these programs, I just write things down on a little bit of piece of paper, so when I need them, they're there. Okay, the other thing that that we need to worry about is our reserve fuel. So our fixed reserve fuel is 2,245 pounds. Now I write this one down at 2,245 pounds. Now when we put that into the FMC, we don't put it in as 2,245, we'll be putting that in as 2.2. I'll show you that later. Okay, so basically have everything that I need from here. On the flight plan tab, it goes in, it shows you a little bit more detail of what the flight plan is. Okay, so those same numbers can be found. It'll tell us our passenger numbers, our cargo, our total weight, our planned fuel. As I said, we looked that up. Our zero fuel weight is 1,222,551. Our release fuel was 10,511 pounds, and our fixed reserve was 2,245 pounds. The other thing that's good with this is it'll tell us the airport elevation. Now we should make reference to that if you're not flying with another program called FS2 Crew, which basically adds a first officer to your flight to help you out or make it a little bit more realistic. If you're not using that program, usually we'll have to enter these numbers in the pressurization tab, the pressurization panel in the overhead panel in the aircraft. but we're not going to have to worry about that today. Okay, so there's our flight route from Dossal 8, Sid to Dossal, taking the Yankee 59 route up to Rivet intersection, and then the Rivet 2 star. I'm not going to worry about all this stuff here. So we've got everything we need. I can, what I do now is I export these. So I have this set up to where my flight simulator is, and I can export, and it will export it to my Pmdg Ngx, my flight plans, and as well as make a prepared flight file. I don't really worry about that one too much. It's mainly this one. Now we do need to take reference to this here. This is what we're going to have to put into our FMC as a company route. That just saves us the hassle of entering everything in here into the FMC. So it's basically the departing airport here, Melbourne, then Sydney, and then a 01. Okay, so we're going to save that. It'll export those. We're going to go OK, close that down, and close this down. So next we're going to load up the simulator, which I already have. I have it set up in Melbourne. Okay, we're at Melbourne Airport at the Qantas Domestic Terminal, Gate 3. So here we're going to set up a few things. The first thing I'm going to set up is the IRS. So I'm going to align these. And we're going to leave that to align. Okay, so the next thing that we will look at will be going to the FMC. This identification page just basically tells us the aircraft that we're flying, the nav data that we're using. Everything is synchronized using the nav data on this version 1508. Okay, so it gets updated monthly, and it's telling me now to enter the IRS position, the engine rating, and the dates that the nav data is active until. So that'll end up on the 19th of August, and then 1509 will be released. Okay, I'll just go back up to the top here and switch these over to nav. Now I don't have this alignment set in realistic mode. I have it in 30-second. Realistic mode takes about 5 minutes, so just to save waiting 5 minutes, I set it at 30 seconds. So we'll go back down here and we'll get this started. So we're going to position initiation. So we're going to set where we are. So we're at Yankee Mike Lima as our reference airport. As our reference airport here. Okay, we won't be using that. What we need to do to set our actual position is click onto the next page. It has our GPS position here. We're just going to click on this. We're going to go previous page and set our IRS position. Okay, so now everything here started turning and doing what it needs to do. I'm not going to worry about the gate. So now we need to set up our route. Okay, so our origin was from Melbourne. Now if you were planning everything manually, you put that in here, and then your destination into this section here, which would be Yankee Sierra Sierra Yankee. Then we would go onto the next page and then fill in each waypoint. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it the easy way because it's the quickest way. So we've got Yankee Mike Lima, Yankee Sierra Sierra Yankee 01. Now that there is where we saved it before when we exported the flight plan. So you have to enter it exactly as it was saved, and we click that here and it comes up. Now just before I go ahead and activate that, Now when I insert that, it doesn't insert the SIDS or stars, it just inserts the I think it was from docile up to rivet. So I'll show you that in a second. So the flight number that we are using today is Quebec Foxtrot Alpha QFA 452, and we'll be putting that in there. And the runway that we're using, like I said earlier, is runway 34. So we put that in there, it displays where the runway is. Okay, so we're going to activate that and then execute. Now the flight plan has been put in. Now if I click on the next page here, as you can see, it's put it in. We're flying, it hasn't put in the SID, so basically it's just saying fly from direct from Melbourne to the docile intersection, taking the Yankee 59 route up to rivet and then direct. So we're going to have to input a few more things just to set this up correctly. Now it is important that you do take note of the SIDS and stars when we were in that flight planning. I forgot to mention that, so just make sure that that you do take note of that, write it down, because you need to be putting that into the FMC here. Okay, so we're going to go to the performance initiation page. Now we're going to use those numbers that we wrote down earlier. And sorry, just before we go on to do that, I'm going to bring up the rights FMC, which I use to basically just use these settings here. Now we're going to go into FS actions, and we're going to set our fuel. Now our fuel that we got for this flight was 10,511. So we're going to enter 10,511 pounds. We're going to put that in here, and as you can see, it's in pounds here. Okay. Now our zero fuel weight, we aren't going to be entering here. We're going to go into payload, and our zero fuel weight is under what we planned for. So what we are going to be putting in, it was 122,551 pounds. We're going to be entering that by putting in 122.5, like so, 122.5. Okay, so we'll enter that into there, and it rounds it off, which is fine, because this aircraft actually can work out all its settings that it needs to be. Okay, so our zero fuel weight, if we click on this once, it'll come up here as 122.3, and we click back on there and it puts it in there. Now our reserves, like I said, was 2,245 pounds, so we're going to put that as in 2.2, and we're going to put that in there. Now cost index, you can select a number from 0 right up to 100. Most people usually put in 100 or something like 99, I believe. And this is from a while ago, that the cost index for Qantas is at 40. So our flight level that we'll be taking today is flight level 370. It's telling us that we can fly up to this altitude for this flight, but we're going to be flying at 370. Okay, so the cruise wind, we aren't going to worry about that. I don't have the average of that at the moment, so I'll just see if I can find the average on it. No. Alright, so the next thing we're going to be entering is our transition altitude, which is in Australia 10,000 feet, and we're going to execute that, and it will change up here, and it has been input. So all that information is now being input. N1 limit, we're going to keep this as it is. You can change this around and set a figure in here, but we're going to leave it as it is. we might actually select a 22k D rate. Okay, we have a long runway, so we don't need to use full thrust, and just keep it there. So we go to the takeoff page, and we'll be using a flaps 5 takeoff. It gives us some speeds here. Before we go with that, we're going to work out what our trim setting needs to be for takeoff, and we just double click on there, brings it up here, and click back in there, and it tells us our trim setting needs to be 5.31. Now we just click on these and we enter our V speeds: V1 132, V rotate 134, and V2 141. We always set our V2 speed into our autopilot, and our V rotate speed is the speed that will be pulling back on the controls to take off. Okay, so just as our descent, I like to set this up now. In your forecast, you've got your transition level. Previous video I did go into explaining a little bit about that. So that in Australia is 11,000, flight level 110. Okay, so we have our legs. So this is our detailed route. It has everything, every waypoint that we'll be going from dorsal right up to rivet. We need to enter some information telling the computer, or the aircraft, the departure that we'll be using out of Melbourne to the dorsal waypoint. So we're going to be clicking on here, the departures arrival page, and we'll be choosing the Melbourne departures, runway 34 and the dorsal 8 departure. It did delete our takeoff speeds, that's easily fixed. Just clear that out. Okay, so it has changed. The pink line here is the line that we is set up now. The white dotted line here is, once I execute this, it'll be the new flight path that we'll be taking, like so. I'll just see if I can make this a little bit easier to read. Okay, so that comes up there, and that's basically the flight path that we'll be taking. And as you can see, that the circle here is Sydney Airport, and then it has rivet, and it's basically nothing from rivet to Sydney. So we're going to input that. And what I will do is I'll make it easy so we can see it when we input it here. So I'm just going to click on here, go through the steps of the flight path to rivet. Okay, and I might just zoom out a bit on this once. Okay, perfect. Alright, so we have rivet here, and we have Sydney here. So we're going into the departures arrivals page again. We're going to go to Sydney, and we're going to click on the arrivals. Now the arrival runway that we were using was runway 34 left, so we'll go for a ILS on runway 34 left, ILS Yankee 34 left. So we'll click on that. It was a rivet 2. Star, so we'll click on that, click on execute. Now it does look a little bit messy there. I'll zoom in and show you. Okay, so what it's telling us now is at Tammy, so here's Tammy, we're going to fly to Boogie, then down to Duddock and to NASHO. After NASHO there's vectors, so it will basically continue. So the line just continues because it's saying that you will be controlled by the ATC from here to here. Now what I can do is an easy fix for something like that, where if you don't have ATC and you're in the simulator, or you're using the ATC in the simulator, which doesn't simulate SIDS or stars, you can just make a little edit by selecting this intersection here, or this fix here, which is here. Clicking on that, it brings it up here. Now we're going to join it by putting it into where the vector is, okay, because we want to get rid of that vector and basically join the two up from NASHO to the next waypoint. So we can put that in, execute that, bring that over there, and it gives us a path from here to there, and then into the runway there. So you'll be making that turn, intercepting the ILS out here, and letting the ILS, instrument landing system, guide us into the runway there. Okay, so we go back to our legs page. We just make sure that everything is right in it, which from looking at it just now, it is correct. So we go back to our takeoff page, and we insert those speeds back into here. Okay, now that's the flight planning, the FMC set up. Now we're pretty much ready to make that flight. The next things that we would have to do is input some of those details into here. So we would turn the flight directors on. There's one over here and one for the co-pilot, the first officer. We'll turn the auto throttle on. Our speed, which was 141, would be set into here. Our heading we don't have to worry about too much, but it is wise to set it to the heading of the runway that you're departing on, so 340, roughly around that. So I'll just do that. It's 340, and our altitude did go directly up to flight level 370. Like so. Okay, we'll be arming the VNAV and the LNAV. So once we take off, we basically manually climb, and we'll be turning on the autopilot and letting the autopilot fly this flight plan that we just entered. Okay, that's the end of the video for the flight planning and inputting that data into the FMC. Might do another video basically doing the flight from Sydney to Melbourne. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.